So my book Real Growth is finally out. The culmination of over 200 podcasts with some of the leaders in the industry. It's taken me about 2 years to pull it together, so it is available now. It's on Amazon, so check out the link in my bio and please let me know how you get on with it. It's all designed to really help people through 3 sections of growth, mindset and business. So check it out, let me know what you think. Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Andrew Walton, who is founder of Cora Health and also founder at First Contact Health. And now, Andrew, just tell me, what was the other thing you added on at the end about the CSP?
I'm a fellow of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, which is a bit of a laugh, really, in that we haven't always seen eye to eye, and it was a bit of a, I don't know whether you know how the fellowship thing works, but people nominate you without you knowing. So a bunch of good people got together and said, he's done some good stuff for MSK, he should get recognised by his professional body. And they sort of the CSP lost the application, and my friends had to go back and go, hang on, what's happened to his application? Anyway, it got to the right place in the end. And I'm very touched by it, because, you know, it is recognition by your peers, so that's important.
No, definitely. Like, I've been particularly looking forward to getting you on, and it's taken a little while to do so. Because I remember when I was in my old role, coming to see what was Connect, I think it was Connect Physio, maybe then, was it there? Where I remember going into the Northeast, and like you were in there, you and I had a chat, but you had a decent sized practice. But what you've gone on to do now is pretty fascinating. And I'm looking forward to digging more into that. But just going back to the origins, like, where are you from originally?
I'm a Geordie. I've only spent 3 of my 63 years outside of God's country, so I'm from the northeast. I'm typical, you know, brought up in the West End of Newcastle, where the streets are not paved with gold, and had lots of jobs when I was sort of a teenager to just try and earn some cash. Went off to eventually got into do physio at I think it was about 6 attempts at my levels before I managed to get sufficient grades, and I got in with people a level of grade that people would laugh at now. Anyway, yeah, so did it in the northeast. Went to Edinburgh, worked in the Royal Infirmary, so worked in a teaching hospital for a few years. Back in Newcastle, did some in new money, you know, band 5, band 6, band 7 roles in the NHS, and that's where I thought I'd spend the rest of my career. And then just after about 5 years, thought I can't bang my head off this particular brick wall. So I started Connect when I was 26, 27-year-old, got married the same year to another physiotherapist. And then, you know, the rest is history. And it's been, you know, I feel like I've had 2 careers. I've had a clinical career, and then I've had a business career.
Yeah, so what prompted physio in the first place? Like, you mentioned that you took quite a few attempts.
Yeah, I managed to leave secondary school with a D in general studies. That was the pinnacle of my, or that was the product rather of I don't know how many years I spent at school, and I felt quite, you know, I mean, that was a pivotal moment really. It was like, how bad am I academically? And I looked around at my mates who were off to do medicine and law and stuff like that, and thought, you're no cleverer than me. I've just got a bit of a problem here. And it was like, on the one hand, that sort of really discouraged me that, you know, God, I just, you know, the route to a career is academia. I'd learned at school, and yet I wasn't good at academia. And then at the same time, I thought, but I'm not thick. So it gave me I've got many chips on my shoulders being a northerner. Give me a big sort of moment quite early in my life to think, right, okay, what are you going to do then? Are you just going to sort of drift along with your D in general studies, or are you going to try and do something different? So that doesn't explain why I went into healthcare. It's a big public health, sorry, not public health, public sector, or there's relatively little entrepreneurship and private sector business in the northeast. There's a lot of public sector. NHS is a big employer. I was brought up and you know, left school when there was a recession on, and my dad said to me, "You don't find people who work in healthcare unemployed and they get a good pension, son. Off you go." So it was a nudge in that direction. You know, I've enjoyed it. I think I think at heart, really, I'm an entrepreneur more than anything else. It's like, and there's a commercial streak in me, an entrepreneurial streak in me, whatever those things mean. There's also really strong values which people would traditionally associate with Northerners as well: integrity, honesty, authenticity, say it how it is, that sort of stuff. So was healthcare a good place for me? Don't know. Made the best of it. Would it have been easier if I'd been in a different part of the country? I think there would have been more competition. It's almost, if you're an entrepreneur in healthcare, you're relatively unusual, and therefore maybe there's less competition. So maybe it is the best place to be. Anyway, so being in the Northeast, entered healthcare for all sorts of different reasons, and I still am, and I'm still very active in healthcare.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. That what was it? Do you think that what wasn't resonating with you when you were not getting the grades in achieving like the grades?
Seriously, I think I've got some kind of learning difficulty, probably a bit of ADHD. These things didn't exist in the 1970s when I was at school. You were just a bit of I was easily distracted. I wanted to try. I think I did try hard, and I think I just couldn't make it work. And a bit of a lack of confidence coming from where I did. That I didn't have a nice posh house like some of the kids that I went to school with, and it just gets on the. Anyway, let's leave that behind. Let's leave the psychoanalysis. But yeah, it may be. There was that turning point. Was like, right, okay, I might not be able to be good at exams, but I can try bloody hard. And I can be, when they've gone to bed, or when they put the pen down, or whenever they stop doing what they're doing at the end of the day, I can keep working. And I would encourage people, other people. It's like, just because you don't do well academically doesn't mean to say that you're not bright and there's not a lot going on upstairs, or something going upstairs anyway.
Well, I think it's really interesting. Like a lot of the people that I've had on here that have gone on to do incredible things in the industry, like Andy Franklin Miller, who's got a PhD in biomechanics, failed maths. And so it's really that the application of things is amazing. Ian Beasley, who was England doctor for 20 years, still working as a sports doc. He was a postman until he was 25. And I just think it's amazing to see that. And whereas there is so much emphasis put on academic achievement in this area. So like what are your views on the fact that there is like the grades you need to get into physio and medical is high?
I think that's part of the problem with how our professions are not moving forward. So I think I graduated 40 years ago last year, something like that. Graduated. I didn't get a degree. I got a diploma. But anyway, I've been around in the industry for 40 years, and it hasn't moved forward very much. And I think that's partly because there is too much emphasis placed on what you can do academically. And I know lots of people have been successful and done different things within healthcare, but normally they come from that different background. But that's not peculiar to healthcare, is it? Some of the most successful people you see in any sector have often had, I think, a combination of things in early life. They've had some security through family, but they've also had some challenges as well, and they can come in all sorts of forms. So I think it's sort of that combination of stability and feeling like you're loved, plus some challenges, helps to build your resilience, and then you get a confidence and a drive and a chip on your shoulder. Combination of all of those things that makes you want to do things differently.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I've never heard that perspective. Like, I would say that's exactly what I had a very loving family, still do have, but also I really lack confidence in academic stuff. Think you're not as up to it. And it wasn't right for me, that pathway. But same as you, I knew I was capable and good at doing things, but it didn't align with that traditional academic format. So it is interesting but yeah, then again, I'm pleased, I'm happy with where I've got to with my career. But back then, you probably wouldn't have looked at it and said, all right, yeah, he's going to go on and do really well with what they're doing.
Yeah, I think the older you get, the wider your perspective is on these things. And I think I'm full of cliches and full of shit. What doesn't kill you makes you better. Yeah, that one. But you need that family or what some. I don't know where. From me, it came from my sort of inner confidence came from having a loving family, and you know, people who forgave you for not being very clever because they thought, well, you've tried, you know, shame on you, patted me on the head, but you know, so you have to have that stability. I think some people don't, and I'm generalising, but that's my journey. That's what I think is important. I've tried to give that to my kids: is encourage them to go off and make mistakes, but love them when they've come back and told me that they have made mistakes. They'll probably watch this and go, "It wasn't like that, really."
Yeah, maybe so. So, like, for when you started, you got onto the physio course, then, like, was it what you were expecting? How did you find it from an academic standpoint?
I think partly it was practical. You know, it was like I want to learn how to do this stuff. So academically, I didn't find it so difficult. Although I did fail my finals and had to resit them. I didn't find it a challenge. I found it quite engaging and interesting, and it kind of made sense. And you know, what I'd learned in physics or not learned in physics at school, actually I had absorbed some of it because it was relevant to mechanics. But because it was theoretical at school, but applied when we came to do physio, it kind of, oh yeah, well of course if you pull on that and then that'll have to lengthen, that'll have to shorten, and all that kind of stuff. So so I found it good. I found it a bit and no, well, it's hard to be disrespectful and respectful at the same time. I don't mean this in any personal way at all, because there are lots of nice people, but I just found a sort of a readiness to accept mediocrity, a lack of ambition, lack of energy, and I felt that right from the beginning in doing the course. And apologies to people who are in my year who might be watching this. And I found that, and I'm generalising. Clearly, it's not like that everywhere, but a general. And I think healthcare is pretty traditional and slow-moving, and that again wouldn't be a natural environment for people like me. And there are lots of people like me who come into the profession. Some of them manage to swim their way out into doing something that's different or elevated within the niche that they want to be. But I find a lot of people get to sort of 30, 35 or 10 to 15 years qualified, and they've eaten it all up. They've learned as much as they possibly can, and then they start to see a working horizon of another 30 years, but a horizon of stimulation of a relatively small amount. They've learned 80% of what there is to learn, and there's lots of boxing in from other professions, from traditions, from norms that stop them from expressing themselves. And that's why, so we find a lot of people in our business are great clinicians, but they come and knock on the door and go, I want something different. What can I do? Operational management instead? Or can I go into the mobilization team? And it's like, yes, you can, because we want to retain you in the business. But what a shame that our professions and the environment in which we operate don't allow the creativity for people to extend themselves within that clinical field. And all the way through, I'm generalizing. I acknowledge that there will be lots of exceptions to this, but I can't talk for everything. I'll just give you my general experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think healthcare is really traditional in that route. And so at what point did you start? What was your vision when you were in the NHS? At what point did you start to think this isn't for me?
Well, I saw lots of, I think, whatever sector you're in, whenever you are, it's a personality thing. I always think there's a better way of doing it. So you improve, you do it better, and then all that does is give you a different viewpoint to go, I can do it better again if you've got your eyes open. So number one. Number two, I think if people are paying for something, and whether that's the NHS or privately, they're paying for what we do, you've got a responsibility to give them the best possible value for money that you can. It's not fair. You're cheating people if you don't. It doesn't that you have to be the best, but you have to be aspiring to be as good as you possibly can be. That's just a sort of basic value for me. So when I got a job in the NHS, I was agitating. I'd be the one knocking on the senior's door going, why don't we do things differently? And too often I got a pat on the head, look, it's the way we've always done it around here. It works. Don't rock the boat. Just get on and do it, Andrew. And I think to some degree, when when I was 22, 23, there was a lot of naivety and inexperience, and that was exactly the right thing to do, was to put me back in my box and say, just get on and do it that way, because I had a lot to learn. But the more I learned, that didn't seem to change people's attitude towards wanting to change, wanting to do things differently, and yet there being obvious opportunities to improve things the way that we're doing them. And I remember one day, one of the senior, team sitting me down and having a word and putting me in my place, but at the same time saying, Andrew, you've got to do something with all this energy you've got. You've got to go out there and make change. While many of your colleagues don't, you're obviously driven in that way. So don't get disheartened. Go out and make a difference. So, I don't want to build myself up as something. There are lots of people like me out there, and I've been really lucky to. There's timing opportunities as your career develops, and I've been in the right place at the right time, and I've worked with some brilliant people who've managed to cover the massive gaps that there are in the things that I'm not good at. That I happen to have worked with people who've been happy to cover my back, as it were, in things that I'm not good at, and value perhaps the things that I brought to them. So there's a lot of luck in this, and I'm not the only one. I don't want to appear to be arrogant, because I'm not.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. The fact is, you've created something really big, and even in that time from when I first met you, it's expanded and expanded. So what was the catalyst to starting in private care? Whether that was at Connect?
I decided to get married to the lovely Bronwyn, who's also an MSK physiotherapist. So neither of us were making much money. We wanted to get married. We wanted to have kids. So I started the business in the same year that I got married. Started the business in January. So that was part of the deal. She knew I was a bit mad. Knew what I wanted to do. I've always had fancy ideas. My mother would have said, that I had an ambition to do some big stuff, not just some little stuff. And you don't share those ideas with very many people. So I'd had that conversation with the future Mrs. W. And, lovely, the association supported me in that. So we got married. And I would absolutely. I think I've spent my career in the NHS. They just haven't paid me. I've done it from the outside in. So I have fulfilled that. In some ways, I'd rather not have had to go through that financial and economic uncertainty that I've had to go through in my career to build something that now is substantial and stable, and well paid. But I've had to go through 30 years in order to get there. I wish I'd been able to do what I've done in changing MSK within the NHS rather than from the outside in. So the catalyst was, I can't make this change within the system. I've got to make this change. It's just something inside me. I've got to drive things in this direction. And I had 5 years of knocking on doors and people patronising me and telling me to go away. So I thought, right, I've got to do it. And at the time, there wasn't an opportunity to do it in the NHS. I started off in private practice. And I did it on top of my the private practice on top of my NHS job, because I couldn't afford to take the risk of jumping from one to the other. And then in the early 90s, so I don't know, 2 or 3 years after I started in private practice, the government at the time wanted to introduce plurality into the NHS market. So they brought GP fund holding in. Anyway, basically they said GPs can have some money and the money can follow the patient. So the GPs can buy the service from whoever they want. And a local GP who I'd seen privately as a patient, played football, rang me up and said, and this is an indictment of the lack of progress within the profession. He said, I get my MSK service from the hospital. I don't know why they need to go to a hospital to have their MSK care. I think it should be out in the community, or ideally in primary care. He said, I've got, I know how much it costs, but I've got very little data from the physio service as to how many times they're seen, what their outcomes are, what the inputs have been. I have very little communication with them in general. So he said, I rang my local hospital and said, now I've got some money, I'd like to come and deliver it in the community. And they went, no, we deliver it in the hospital. And So he rang me up and said, would you do it in my GP practice? And I thought, yeah, that's exactly where it should be. So it's back to in the right place at the right time. It's some people around me. My attention to detail is poor, but I was working with some people who were happy to, sort of do some of the detailed stuff. So off we went, private practice to start with, then in the NHS, did a bit of Occy Health type of stuff. We got to about, I don't know, I'll make the number up. After 15 years, we're 80 people, turnover of a couple of million quid maybe, 4 or 5 private practices and a few GP practice, GP contracts, NHS contracts. And we won a big contract in London, in Camden. I opened Frontline to read the editorial, said, what do these people from, they got our names wrong, they got where we're from wrong, they said we're from Northumberland, we're from Newcastle, and what do they know about delivering physiotherapy in the capital at the Royal Free and UCLH don't, and they sort of looking down their noses at us. So I got on the train, went down to London. Anne Green, who was the chair of council at the time, and Phil Gray, who was the CEO, were kind enough to give me the time to meet with them. I don't think I changed what the CEO thought about independent sector involvement in the NHS, but Anne Green sort of gave me the time of day, and we hit the ground running and didn't do a very good job, frankly. This is Connect delivering it in Camden. So I took a long, hard look at myself and thought, we're not as clever as we thought we were, are we? There were all sorts of local things happening, which were political things that were anti-independent sector that made our job difficult. But nevertheless, it wasn't good for our reputation. And it wasn't good for in here. It's like, we want to do a good job. That's why we're doing it. So I had a good hard look at ourselves. I realised that actually the business was, I think we had one non-physio in the business, and the rest of us, so I might be running the business, but I'm a physio by background. We had nobody in there who really knew anything about what good care needed to look like. We didn't know what the infrastructure needed to look like to deliver that good care. So got a non-exec director in with the specific purpose of help us to, we have aspirations to do this, but we're not set up operationally to be able to do it. And then I think it's the cleverest thing I've ever done was to, and I would urge people, this is a really important lesson, is recognize your weaknesses, have confidence in your strengths, and then surround yourself with people who, it's a team game. Business or delivering anything is a team game. And it's obvious, but lots of people don't do it, particularly when it's their baby and they've created it, is surround yourself with people who are as good or better than you. You don't need to be the top of the tree. Get the best people that you possibly can. And I've consistently done that since I got that lesson about around 2010. So got the non-exec in. She said, you need to diversify your management, so you're not all clinical. Selected some good people, selected some wrong people, had some difficult conversations sometimes, but largely we built a team, and increasingly I've pushed other people forwards and stood behind them and supported them where they needed support, but let people express themselves because they're better at loads of stuff than I am. I've still got a niche, but actually I've got heads of, directors of, who know much more about the fields of governance or IT or whatever it needs to be, and they do a great job. The last thing they want to do or need it is for me to be snapping around the heels doing, well, I think we used to do it like this, I think it'd be better like that. Let the team, which is what I've done.
So what would you say your niche is then?
I think I have it, just because I've been around for a long time. I've got an understand. Healthcare moves very slowly, doesn't it? The opportunities in the market move very slowly. There's some fundamentals in there which are really important, but there's a lot of stuff that flip-flops around on the surface that people seem to get distracted by. And one of these it's probably the ADHD thing, if that's what it is. I'm sort of hyper focused when I need to be on certain things. So I'm pretty good at, and because I haven't been a complete pain in the neck, and I've been around for a long time, and I've demonstrated that I've stayed true to my beliefs, and I've been consistent in my values. Then, I've always asked for help and asked people about their opinion and listened and done things as a result of those conversations. So I still have relationships with people who are increasingly in senior positions who help to give me some insight into what the world might look like. And then I translate that into the strategy for the business. So I think my niche is understanding the market and interpreting how we need to move as an organisation, and we need to move as professions in order to exploit the oppositions and take us out of we're bottom feeders in this pond of healthcare, and which I think is unfair, because I think we deliver great value, but we're not recognised for it either through NHS payers or in private practice either. So I think my niche is probably around strategy.
Yeah. So in terms of like that position of physios and where they fit within the hierarchy, then, so like what's your views on how that looks?
Well, I talk about the prevalence gap. There is 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people have musculoskeletal problems. If you look at the provision, and I'm not just a physio, I'm an MSK clinician, or that's the world that I live in, and there's multiple professions, very good professionals from other professions working in that field. What I don't understand is why less than half of the people who've got a musculoskeletal problem present to experts. What I also don't understand is why people tend to go and see an orthopaedic surgeon, particularly privately, and have a scan in preference to go and seeing a sports therapist or a physio or a chiropractor or osteopath. Why do they do that? And then when they go to see a physio privately, why are they only prepared to spend when they'll pay 600 quid or more an hour to go and see an orthopaedic surgeon? It's like, but if you need surgery, go and pay whatever the orthopaedic surgeon wants to charge you. But if you've got a non-surgical MSK problem, don't go and see an orthopaedic surgeon, but value somebody else who's an expert in the musculoskeletal rather than the orthopaedic field in the same kind of way. And we're way off that. And it's hardly changed at all over 20 years, over 40 years rather. In fact, we are in the NHS, we are paid less per patient than we were 10 years ago. Where's that going to take us? So I've always disliked that unfairness. It's bleeding obvious, isn't it? I'm not saying anything. So why aren't we making a difference to it? So as part of the role that I now see in my career is I've got a bit of credibility because I've done some stuff I said I was going to do. We're collecting loads of data which demonstrates our excellent outcomes. It's quite hard to benchmark that in some cases because not many people collect outcomes and publish it, but from what we can find, we get excellent outcomes. We see the impact on orthopaedic and diagnostic demand through delivering good community MSK services. And therefore, if you're reducing the demand for that really expensive stuff by doing good community MSK stuff, then you're saving the system money. But at the minute, they'll pay £4.50 for us to save them millions of quid. I'd rather have a fairer relationship where we have a gain share relationship where we say, right, look, we'll take all the risk on delivering this, but we know we're going to save you some money. So will you give us half your saving, please? And that would several 100% increase our profits. And then why wouldn't we share that with colleagues? That's the way. We've had the unions and the professional bodies trying to lobby for a bit more money so we get another few percent every year. But everybody gets a few more percent. That's not changing the dial. The way to change the dial is to deliver great care, have data that demonstrates the care that we do, in particular have economic data which shows that we change the flow of patients and therefore the costs downstream, and then get a share of that. But at the minute, we're not doing that successfully. And I think the same applies in private practice. Another business that I'm involved in starting at the minute is aimed at private practice, and we're creating a national brand because there isn't a national brand. And part of that prevalence gap that I talked about is people don't know who to trust. They don't really understand what musculoskeletal means. They don't understand that an orthopedic surgeon's there for surgery, and there are a bunch of the rest of us who are there for doing some other stuff. So I'm still fighting for that, for what I think is justice, really, for fairness. Is we're doing a good job. Absolutely, there's room for improvement. There's too much mediocrity, but there's room for improvement. We need to get our own houses in order, but also we need to educate the public or anybody who's going to be paying for this, that if you spend money on us, we're not going to undervalue ourselves. You're going to have to pay for some decent care, whether that be in the NHS or otherwise. You should be paying a bit more for this, but value it, because these are the outcomes that you'll get if you have good care from musculoskeletal clinicians. Because you go to see an orthopedic surgeon with a non-surgical problem, and it's a waste of money.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting with that bit of it. I mean, I'd be interested to hear your perspective, but I've seen a significant shift of investment in the private sector in the last few years, and we all of our work used to be in the NHS, whereas now a lot more of it is in the private sector because there's demand for it. Like the NHS isn't able to facilitate some of this stuff, and maybe because of some of the reasons that you've mentioned there. So like, what have you seen change in the last 5-10 years in this space?
Well, there are different markets, aren't there? So I think it's different in different markets. In the NHS market, we've seen sort of starting and stopping. Lots of opportunities, then no opportunities. Lots of opportunities, and then no opportunities. We've seen commissioning at a smaller scale getting much bigger. So, pardon me. So we're just our average contract size win would be for a population of 250,000 people. Now it's a population of 1 to 1.5 million. So contracts are 6 times bigger. They used to be, well, we want a bit of physio, or we want a bit of tier 2, sort of APP type of stuff. They've been bundled together, a bit of rheumatology in, a bit of chronic pain in. So, which is great, because you get real economies of scale, and we're able to attract better talent when you're providing different layers. And it's other people that come and work with us that help to build this stuff. So in the NHS market, I think it's largely going in the right direction, because we've got that economic that you invest in the community service, you save some money downstream, because the NHS is so short of money and the Treasury and the taxpayer aren't going to give them any more. Then there's a real opportunity to drive change there. The change I want to see is a bit more equitable, as I described. Hang on, we're doing this really good job and yet not paying us very much. Don't strangle, kill the golden goose. Then in the private market, which I haven't been in until, literally we're just entering it now, my observation from the outside is there are lots of private equity and venture capitalists and other investors who are seeing a consolidation opportunity, because they see MSKs, there's a lot of it around, and the market's not very well served, or it's very fragmented. So there's an opportunity to consolidate, bring some practices together, bring some providers together to build something bigger. Great. I don't know any of these people, so this is complete speculation. My concern is the focus is too much on the commercial opportunity. And I know how private equity work, because we have private equity investors in, and I know that they're not all the same, they're different. My concern is that it's too much, that they're looking at veterinary practice, they're looking at law, where a lot of this dentistry, where a lot of this consolidation is taking place, with, I would say, mixed results. So why I'm doing something different is in this next phase of my career. I'm still in Cora, and it's my first love, and that's my absolute priority. But I'm founding with 2 or 3 other people, First Contact Health, which is going to be a private offer, so there's no conflict of interest with Cora. One's in one market, one's in the other. But I've learned some stuff over the last 10 to 15 years, not about MSK medicine, but about how business works, how the world works, how marketing, these various aspects that you need to make a business work in the private market. So I've been in the private market before, then got out of it about 15 years ago to concentrate on the NHS. So I haven't learned any more about marketing. I haven't learned any more about premises. But I know about MSK. I know about opportunities. I know much more about governance. I know much more about business. I know about attracting capital and how you've got to spend that capital and some of the difficult decisions you make. I'm putting a lot of my own money into First Contact Health. So there is considerable risk here, but I feel in a better position to do that now than I did 40 years ago when I started Cora. So I want to take the learning, but the fundamental of this is I want to see better MSK care. I want to see more opportunities for clinicians to express themselves. I believe fundamentally in a greater diversity of provision. So I think a bit of competition in the market and a bit of people doing it their own way, the strong succeeding and the weak not, and people learning from failure back to whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think because we haven't had that, we've become very stale as professions. I think it's time to open that up and let people go within a regulated environment. Let anybody do anything. But there's plenty of regulation to keep it safe. So that's why I'm moving on and doing. I'm not moving out of Cora. I'm now a non-exec director. It's back to there's lots of great people there doing a great job. They don't need me 5 days a week. So let me go off and do some other stuff that where I can add more value.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. But tell me more about then what the actual bones of First Contact Health are then.
Okay. So, have you heard of MSKPN, Musculoskeletal Partners Network? Yeah, I started that with a few other people pre-COVID, 2017-18. I came across a guy in there who would work in Specsavers. He ran Vision Express, and he started Vets for Pets from scratch. And he'd open a clinic where he lives doing MRI and, general diagnostics and physio. And he got some things right, he got some things wrong. The things that he got right are things around branding, marketing, finance. The things that he wasn't getting right was what the offer should be, what MSK clinicians do you want doing what, and in basic terms, trying to marry up the commercial and the clinical requirements to deliver a good business. Probably a little bit too much focused on the commercial and not enough focused on the clinical. You've got to get that balance right. You know that. So I thought the bits that you don't know, Peter, is my bread and butter. But what you know about the commercial side of things and joint venture partnering, which is where you've got local ownership of a clinic with the support of head office, and it's a local clinician who's owning that shop, got the ownership, got the drive, got the creativity, got the freedom, but it's supported around the administrative stuff, the commercial stuff, the banking. I think will work brilliantly well for MSK clinicians and for provision in the market. So I thought, my inclination to Peter was just anything you need to do that I can help you to make you successful, just let me know. I've gradually got sucked in and fallen in love with the concept, and now I'm spending, a day or two a week, and I'm spending, I'm investing my own cash into doing it, because I think that what private practice has missed before is getting that commercial and clinical in the right balance. I think with local ownership, so I think the joint venture partner model is critical. I think where we are is people don't value physio or MSK clinicians sufficiently to pay them enough money that you can invest in the governance and the infrastructure properly, because people won't pay enough. And then for the people to get a decent salary, there's just not enough money in it. So I think the MRI is a clever trick. Don't just sell the labour, but sell MRI, which is more profitable, and use some of that to get the scale and the governance and the investment, and they fit together from a clinical point of view largely anyway. They're not against each other. They're complementary. So I think that model, with Peter's unique experience of doing retail healthcare well in specs, in the spec world, and then in vets for pets, just the things he knows, so we don't have to go back to the beginning. And I stopped doing private practice because I didn't know what Peter knew. So I think that combination of Peter and I and one or two other people give it a chance of changing the dial in terms of private MSK. And that's me talking, and I wouldn't be investing if I didn't believe it, and I'm passionate about it. That doesn't mean to say there aren't other ways, better ways of doing it. So again, sorry if I come across as being arrogant. I'm really just passionate, not arrogant.
Yeah, no, not at all, not at all. No, I think it's interesting on it. So what actually is the offering then? How does the structure of the company work?
Oh, I hope I get this right, but in basic terms, we're going to create local entities. So it'll be on an A road in or out of town. It'll be a few thousand square feet. It'll have some rehab space, some consulting rooms, an MRI, and an ultrasound, and it'll have a reception area. There will be one or two clinicians who are the joint venture partner in that local entity, and they will own 50% of the shares of that local business, which is a separate limited company. The other 50% of the equity will be owned by First Contact Health, the main business. Its contribution is to do the identify the site, find the location, do the marketing, set up the IT, create the space. Then the clinicians come in and they do. And when the roof leaks or the landlord's knocking on the door, it's the mothership that will deal with that kind of stuff. If there's a problem with IT, it's the mothership that will deal with that kind of stuff. We want the clinicians focused on getting up every day to deliver a great service so that patients want to come back. 100% of the dividend are earned by the local joint venture partner. The local business pays a management fee every year up to the mothership. So there's incentives for both, and it's a true partnership, because if the thing fails, there's no management fee, and there's a load of debt that's owned by this thing. And then the people on the ground, if they're successful, they're guaranteed the salary, but they get a dividend on top. And that's where really the incentive and the reward is for people. But we have a strong clinical philosophy and a way of doing things, which is, similar to Cora and similar to lots of other people. It's not going to be, we're not going to bend something out of shape. And that's that combination of governance and clinical. You've got to get the plan right and the governance right in that, and then the money will follow that.
And so where are you at with that? Where in terms of sites and people?
Well, if you start a business from scratch and you haven't got much money, you're not risking very much, are you? We're putting a lot of capital in to get it started. Clearly, the key people here in making this successful are joint venture partners. So we've got to be 100% confident we've got the right people on the ground when we start. So we've talked to a number of people, and it either hasn't been right for those people, or they've not been right for us. So we're still trying to find the right joint venture partners, and we're just starting a LinkedIn recruitment campaign. It's all been sort of word of mouth stuff, but now starting a more formal campaign. So yeah, I'll plug it. Look at LinkedIn, First Contact Health, if you're interested. And that, that's SEMs, the sports therapists, the physios, the chiros. You've got to have a sound clinical philosophy, and you've got to have drive, and you've got to be. And we're not we've talked to a lot of people who are maybe 15, 20 years qualified because we thought that was probably the sort of the niche that we wanted. But actually, most people who want to do something have done it in something else. So we're looking for more people that, who are maybe 5 years qualified, who have that drive inside them and are now looking to do something different, not people who are already doing something, are established in something. But anyway, all welcome.
Yeah, no, it sounds interesting. I think it's a there is a lot of interest and investment into the sector, and it's great to see it. It gives people loads of opportunities to explore what works for them in that area. And you're absolutely fine to plug that, and we'll put some links in for it as well. I mean, I'm still keen. Like, we only touched on some of the stuff with Connect, and like what you have created there is incredible, and now into Cora. So just talk about like what you've done that bit in London where you had a few little bits, but now like where are you at now with Cora? What is Cora?
Cora is a community MSK and diagnostic and surgical services business. That's not a short title, is it? We're basically two divisions. The commonality is clinical philosophy, focus on quality governance. The infrastructure that's required to deliver both of those is similar. So the clinical activity, community MSK, you would understand, we're the largest community MSK provider at the NHS by a factor of, I don't know, it's not a willies out sort of thing, but we are bigger, quite considerably. We're delivering into, there's 22 ICBs, something like that. Not all contracts are the same. Some are, as I described it, that are very wide for a wide population and wide in terms of the clinical services. Others are much smaller. In the diagnostic and surgical division, we have a lot of sonography, largest sonography provider to the NHS and the prisons. We've got a number of diagnostic fixed and mobile facilities. And we have two clinics or day case hospitals, really, that do a mixture of stuff, one in Norwich and one in West London. And in our merger with HealthShare, that's when we were exposed to the diagnostic, and it fits together because some of those are complementary, aren't they? So areas now where we're delivering MSK, we're also able to bring the diagnostics in, and join things up more for patients, and there's less delay. There are less errors because it's you're on one system and you've got one set of eyes plotting the patient journey.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like for that thing, then. So how, like, when you're doing that merger, which is two big entities, I was familiar with both of them. Like, how long does something like that take, and like what is the process?
Yeah, I mean, so in my career, I've disposed of businesses, sold businesses, so things that were built up and then thought, well, actually, this doesn't fit. We're an occupational health business, and it just wasn't getting the attention it needed to internally to develop it. So it was becoming stale. So we sold that on. I've done 2 or 3 acquisitions. So that's buying another business. It's a different sort of integration. And I've done a merger once. And that's a harder integration because you've got 2 businesses coming together in one rather than one being subsumed by another. I think Nick and Neil, who are the founders of HealthShare, I think, it took a long time to get to the altar to get married because we already both had a child each. If you understand what I mean in that analogy, it was like, hang on, I'm doing it my way. And we've been competitive for years. So it was kind of, so I think it was probably harder for the 3 of us to get to learn to work together than it was for other people. But because we had to get over that before we did the deal, and nobody else knows about the deal, or very few people in the organisation know about the deal, we got over that. So therefore, they were when the rest of the people in each organisation were looking to, hang on, why we're getting together, we that's the 3 of us, Nick and Neil and I, were able to go around the organisation giving. I've lost you.
Can you hear me? I can still hear you. Can you hear me? Are you back? I think we're back.
We start again.
We can cut that bit out. No worries.
Yeah, okay. So when the two organisations got together, Nick and Neil and I were absolutely 100% sure that this was the right thing to do for ourselves, for the business, particularly for the business into the future, and for the colleagues working in the business. It gave more security to everybody. The bigger we were, and there was a genuine fit in terms of values as well as in what we did. So fortunately, when you announce it to the business, we were already in that place. Therefore, because we'd been leaders of the businesses and people looked to us for guidance or for reassurance, if you like, we're able to, with confidence, together as a bunch of three people, is go around and talk to key people in the business, explain what the rationale was, why it was good for us, the business, and them, and give a view into the future. And actually give a lot of people about some reassurance about their own job security and the opportunities he created for those individuals. So I think that answers your question. I might have got a long way from where it was, but I think it answers it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, how have you, when you were starting out, like, did you envisage that you were going to create anything like this?
No, even in my wildest dreams. And I mean, I still pinch myself and go, and it's like I said, the cleverest thing that I've done was realize my own limitations and bring people in and not be too protective of, because I built this, it must be good. So don't knock it down, please. Just do it as I've always done it. So that's definitely the cleverest thing I've ever done. And if I hadn't done that, I'd be still running a couple of clinics in the Northeast.
Yeah,
the team game.
Well, I think I normally ask about what your advice is, but I guess that's good advice in itself, isn't it? Acknowledge what you're good at, acknowledge what you're not good at. And yeah, no, it's amazing. Look, I think I've followed your journey from when I was starting out in this industry. So amazing, congratulations on what you've achieved. And it's great to see you've still got the energy to go on and do this next entity. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with that.
It's still the same things that drive me. And this will sound cliche, and everybody go, oh, well, you would say that you've got loads of money in the bank, but it's never been about the money. It's about we offer so much when done well, and we don't get value for money, and that's fundamentally unfair. And I think I have a bit of responsibility because of the journey that I've been on to continue and try and persuade people to value it more. So I'm doing it for myself because I enjoy that, and I've got loads of chips on my shoulder. But what I'd like people watching this to do is to think, come on, let's all get together. It's back to that team thing. There's an opportunity, I think, partly because the NHS is short of money, partly because there's some investors coming into the private space. I do see the next 5 years there'll be huge change in both sectors. So let's go and grab the opportunities, and people should have the confidence and see that opportunity and go and grab it by come and join in with me, or join in with somebody else. But let's not just think we're going to be doing the same thing that we've always done, because we'll just get what we've always got. Cliche number 27, time to go.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great thing. Like, I'm a massive optimist as well, and it's great to have that energy and look at all the opportunities, because there's never been more opportunities in this space now, and it's really exciting. So look, yeah. I really appreciate it. You got me fired up, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you go on to do with all this stuff.
Yeah, well, let's see what the proof of the pudding is. Yeah, great. Okay.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate your time.
Bye.